All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Burrow. I am back, joined by Richard and Robbie to talk a lot about some basketball, talk about some baseball, some wins in both, some losses in both. But we move on. Before we get started, gentlemen, Robbie, how you doing today? I think it's my first time we've ever been on here together.
I'm doing good myself. I made it back from Memphis alive. Will didn't find me. He found Birdman, but he didn't find me. But we're back and we're better than ever, and we're ready to roll.
We love to hear it. And Richard, I know you just got back from Orlando. How was that trip for you with the baseball team?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to Orlando.
Oh, I thought you were
Rain.
just saying that you did.
Unfortunately, rain happened. A lot of rain. Trip got canceled. But yeah, I made the most of it. Had fun watching the USF game, even though it was a loss. Went to SMU instead. Well, went to the SMU game instead, and had even more fun. So great makeup for what happened with the Orlando trip that got canceled eventually.
There's been a whole lot going on with FAU sports in the last week. We're going to start with talking about the basketball team who, since we last spoke to you guys, went 1-1 with victories over SMU and then falling to Memphis. JJ, as I guess you guys have noticed, not on the show today, so he will not have to atone for his sins for what he said on the show last week and how blasphemous he was. But here we are in his stead. So I think the best way to take a look at this is Richard, I'll go to you. What do you think just the biggest difference was in what led to a win versus SMU versus not being able to get the job done in Memphis?
Well, what led to the win against SMU was FAU's ability to navigate past SMU's elite perimeter defense, which was the best in the conference and one of the best in the country. And on top of that, they had great performances from Vlad Golden, who had over 20 points, and then Elijah Martin, who also had over 20 points, as including a fantastic one-handed posterizer that ended up being the top play of SportsCenter's top 10 plays after that night. So the way they were able to handle things against SMU, who was a great team in their own right. They're competing for a top 4 spot in the conference, which automatically gives those 4 teams an automatic bye to the quarterfinals for the conference tournament, which is very important for FAU to clinch at the very least clinch a spot in the top 4. And with that win, it helped them. But of course, with the loss to Memphis, where David Jones, who is a top 10 scorer in the country, one of the best in Division I basketball, he went off. And unfortunately, FAU did not have an answer to slow him down, even though Memphis was shorthanded because their big man, Malcolm Dandridge, was involved in an academic scandal, alleged academic fraud, as the reports. Yeah, allegedly, yeah. Emphasis on allegedly. Yeah, even though Vlad Golden played very good, he had 22 points. He's on a very good streak of 20-point games. And Elijah Martin had 13 as well. He just didn't have the same performance as SMU, and Janelle Davis had 20, though he wasn't exactly himself in that game. But yeah, being unable to limit David Jones, who had 25 points in that game, and 11 rebounds on top of that, it was just hard for FAU to overcome, even though the margin for error was so small and the game was very close nonetheless.
Yeah, and we've seen in the last 2 losses, Robbie, where FAU within the last few minutes, well, really halfway through the second half against USF, FAU was down by 25 points. And then against Memphis, we're trailing by, I think it was 8 points with 3 or 4 minutes to go. And then you see FAU make that late surge and just fall short there at the end. Both, I think, were 4-point losses. So do you take any positives away from that fight at the end of the game, or do you look at it in the sense of doesn't matter either way, we lost both games?
Well, I personally do take positives away from it, and I know the team does. I mean, I know the team isn't happy with the outcome per se, but they're battling. I mean, these are good teams. USF, they're still on a win streak. I think it's 13 games now. And Memphis is Memphis. When they're on their best game, they're one of the most talented teams in the conference, maybe the country. I don't know, not this season, but they could have been. But anyway, they're fighting against these teams down the stretch, and they're finding their groove. It's just, come the AAC tournament and come March, you want to see them be able to find that groove earlier. That's how they were able to be so successful in big games last year. Is they were on all of them, really. The whole team was on right when the ball tipped, and right now it's just taking a little bit for them really to get into it. It's tough to pinpoint exactly why, but you just want to see them really find that drive early, like they did in the SMU game. They got going early in the SMU game, and it's just they haven't been able to find that mentality they have late in minutes early.
Yeah, and it's so wild the shift in perspective when it comes to this FAU team. Where just 2 years ago, if you made it past the first round or the second round in the conference tournament, you would have considered FAU's season have being a success. Now we're currently sitting at second in the American Athletic Conference, 3 games behind the top of the conference, and we're kind of looking at this in a negative sense. We're looking at it as like, what's wrong with this FAU team? Fell out of the rankings 2 weeks ago, and now while probably still will feel pretty confident about making the tournament, there is a little bit of question of there. The shift in mentality around FAU has been so quick, and I think as FAU fans, we don't necessarily know what to do with it, to do with these new expectations, going from a team that was really just fluttering between the middle and bottom of Conference USA to now gotten that upgrade and now almost at top of the AAC. So before we talk about baseball, and then we'll come back to basketball at the end of the episode, I want to hear both of you guys' perspective on the tournament and how confident are you in the sense that FAU, I don't know if FAU doesn't have to worry, or maybe just you guys don't necessarily worry. I'll start with Richard. Richard, where do you think FAU stands right now? Currently sitting at the 9th seed in Joe Lenardi's breakdown. How confident are you that FAU, at the very least, will still make the tournament, even if they don't win their conference championship?
Right. So to keep it simple, I'm not completely concerned about FU's chances of actually missing the tournament. I believe they will clinch it at the very least, an at-large in the tournament. Like at the very least, they need to go 2-1 in these games. Like beating Tulane at home and beating either North Texas on the road or Memphis. Either one will do. At least 2-1 to finish with a great record in both overall and in conference play. If you go 3-0, perfect. Like you pretty much have your at-large spot pretty much secured by then, and you won't need to do any more extra wins in the conference tournament, even though that is also even better. But yeah, these expectations that have surrounded the team since the end of last season, it's pretty much the main reason why I stress it to be important that we keep our expectations level-headed. Like I've been, as a sports fan, especially when it comes to the NBA for the Boston Celtics and then soccer for Brazil, those two teams are teams that have a lot of expectations placed on them, especially if they have loads of talent on the roster. And if they come up short, they are always bombarded with loads of criticism for not being able to go further than they should have. And it's something that we should not apply to this FU team, who has only gotten this success as of recent since last season. Like a lot of expectations being placed on to go championship or bust. I think that's very drastic and probably even hurtful, because we didn't even reach the championship game. We were a missed shot away from the championship game, but nonetheless, we didn't make the championship game. We only appeared in the Final Four. And it's important to keep that in mind, that as long as we do what we need to do in these last 3 games against Tulane, North Texas, and Memphis, that we just get the job, that the team just gets the job done. Playing together, not playing selfish, moving the ball around constantly, and just feeding their top guys the ball. Flagel and Janelle Davis, Elijah Martin, and all the key role players, Brandon Weatherspoon, Nick Boyd, Brian Greenlee, and even the surprise players who come around from time to time, Trey Carroll, Brendan Laurie, and Jalen Gaffney. You just got to play together, and the rest will come.
Robbie, I'll go to you with the same question. How confident do you feel that this road ultimately will lead to the NCAA tournament?
Well, I am pretty confident. It's tough. I mean, you would have loved FAU to win some of those tough early season. You would have loved to see him beat Bryant. You would have loved to see him beat FGCU. And then right now, who knows where the conversation would be. But you lose those 2 games, and now the end of the season becomes a little more difficult. But at the end of the day, they're very good on their home court. The 2 games on the home court versus Tulane and Memphis, they're must wins. And so is the road. You really want to see them go 3-0 so they don't have any questions going into the AAC tournament. But going into that AAC tournament is really when I personally expect to see this team kick it in a full gear. And then if they win that tournament, it's not even an issue. It won't really affect the seeding. I feel like, if they have to win the tournament to make it, it won't really affect the seeding too much. They won't really go up or down. They'd probably stay anywhere from an 8 to a 10 range. but I'm not sounding the alarms yet. Any more losses, if they lose tomorrow, then the next, or if they lose Saturday, then the next two are home. The next two are must wins, and if they lose the next one, it's so on. So you want to just see them get into that AAC tournament without any stress, but I think everything will work itself out. They are doing what they said they are and getting to a point of playing their best basketball come the AAC tournament in March. So.
If you look at Joe Lunardi's breakdowns as well as some other college basketball insiders, FAU is by no means on the bubble in terms of one of those last 4 teams to make it in. They're not really scraping down there yet. But like you mentioned, Robbie, 1, possibly 2 more losses, and you very much see yourself in that conversation if you don't win the conference tournament that you're watching on that Selection Sunday, crossing your fingers you get in, as opposed to last year where we're just watching to see who we play. You find yourself watching to see if you get in at all. And there's currently, as things stand, in Joe Lunardi's bracketology, 2 American teams in the tournament as things stand. That'd be FAU at our 9th seed, poised to take on Boise State in the Midwest bracket in the first round. And then USF is looking like they're going to be making it in. They have it currently seeded as an 11th seed, playing against St. Mary's in the East bracket. So could possibly see 2 at-large, 1 at-large and 1 conference champion from the American Athletic Conference, and hopefully FAU does it with the conference championship route just to take all of our anxiety away. We'll get back to talking about the basketball team a little bit later on the episode. And Richard, tell us about how this baseball team has been doing.
Yeah, definitely. And after a competitive three-game set against a nationally ranked Vanderbilt squad, ranked number 6 in the country at the time, according to the latest, according to the Division I baseball poll at the time, FAU showed a lot of competitive spirit for most of that series, especially in the first 2 games, with plenty of runs from Emilio Gonzalez, Brando LaRue, 2 of the latest newcomers to this team from after all the players departed from last season. Two of those newcomers contributed almost immediately in the first game, and then they kept that up in the second game, and they finally got the win in the second game, which had the series tied 1-1 before Vanderbilt ultimately secured it with a convincing win where FAU just struggled on both sides. And they bounced back, sweeping Towson in a 3-game set where it wasn't even close. And when it comes down to it, this was the best pitching performance from FAU in quite some time, especially when you consider that quite some time actually goes all the way back to 2018, where the last time they conceded 3 runs in a series was against George Washington, and it was their first home series of that year. That FAU team in 2018 went on to make an appearance in the NCAA regionals. So that's some context with how good the pitching was against Towson. Unfortunately, the pitching did not keep that up against UCF, falling an 11-6 loss to the Knights, who were receiving votes in national polls yesterday at the time this week. So USCF currently 6-0 following yesterday's win over FAU. It's just something for FAU to learn from. They've faced some pretty good competition with Vanderbilt and UCF, and they look forward to their matchup against North Florida and Stonehill. 4 games, very winnable, but they just got to they can't take their talent for granted. You just got to be careful. Like on both the batting and the pitching, seeing Brandon Rolu, Spencer Rich, Christian Adams, Emilio Gonzalez provide some excellent moments with their hitting, and then seeing the pitchers with Tyler Murphy, CJ Williams, and Trey Beard, also a newcomer, the latter being a newcomer who has impressive pitching performances, has impressive pitching ability, I should say. But yeah, using those next 4 games to bounce back from that loss should be very important for this team.
And building off what Rich said a little bit, 29-3 blowing out Towson, that's a big bounce back. And I think that's a little bit why they scheduled that series right after Vanderbilt. I don't think that's any disrespect to Towson. I think that's, Coach Mack believing in his team. Okay, we can beat this team the way that they expected to get beat by Vanderbilt, but they didn't. They were competitive against Vandy. They come out and they dominate that series. And, against UCF, they had the rough start. They were down to 11-1, but they like FAU basketball, they fought late. They lost 11-6, but they get Dylan LaPointe gets his first career homer, and then Jake Milan hits a 2-run homer. Something that I've really liked, though, especially in the Towson series and even in the Vanderbilt series, is our long relief has been solid. Brian Booley against Vanderbilt was really solid in the win. And then in the series against Towson, the end appearance, 2 innings pitched, 2 Ks. Danny Trahey, same thing, 2 innings, 2 Ks. Dylan Oborn had 5 Ks across his 2-inning appearance. So our long relief right after the starters has been really solid. I think if we can build on our starting pitching a little bit and get the starters, a little bit deeper. CJ Williams was able to go 7 innings against Towson, but you want to see that consistently. I think the pitching really has improved. It didn't show it against UCF early, but it's just a building process, and I think the next 2 series will provide a chance to bounce back.
There's a lot of exciting things going on with FAU athletics. We have the basketball schedule starting to come to an end here, and we're looking forward to the tournament. Then we got FAU baseball that's coming into full swing, pun intended. FAU sitting currently at 4-3. Obviously, like Richard mentioned, that number 6, that victory against number 6 Vanderbilt is pretty huge for what this FAU team can do if everything is being put together and playing at their full potential. So we're going to be talking a lot more about baseball over these next few episodes as the basketball season, like I said, comes towards an end. Kind of similar to what we did with the football and the basketball over in October when basketball is about to start up. We're going to be doing the same here, where you're going to hear a little bit about basketball, a little bit about baseball over here on the FAU Owl's Nest. I apologize. I think this is the second show in a row that people have seen my feet. I accidentally kicked my tripod and the camera just goes like this. I mean, you guys saw me messing with it in the beginning. Like, it just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. I don't know what happens. I spilled Gatorade on myself like 10 minutes ago. Absolute shambles, but we digress. We move on. And we move on back to FAU basketball. And FAU is going to be playing Tulane for the second time this season. If you guys remember earlier on this year, playing Tulane in Tulane, a game that came all the way down to the wire, that kind of the opposite of the last 2 games that we lost with USF and Memphis. FAU had a pretty comfortable lead with 2 or 3 minutes left to go, up by 9 points, and Tulane storms back all the way to take the lead in the last minute. FAU won there on free throws, courtesy of Elijah Martin, win that game 85-84. And Richard, we'll start with you. This Tulane team at the time was a team that was kind of fluctuating between the middle to the top tier of the American Athletic Conference standings, a team that you could potentially see sneak into that top 4 to get that bye when come conference time. However, since we've played them, they found themselves with a really poor run of form, having lost 7 of their last 8 games after a win over Memphis, team that FAU just lost to. So what do you think's been going wrong necessarily with this Tulane team?
I don't think they've had the same edge they had on the offensive end so far at this point in the season than they did earlier in the season when we played them. Losing 7 of your last 8 games, with your only win being an overtime victory over Temple, who is one of the worst, to put it, brutally, one of the worst teams in the conference.
Yeah, they are. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and having losses to UAB, who is an underrated team in this conference in their own right, then you see the rest of the losses they had. Twice to SMU, 1 to Memphis, 1 to Charlotte, and 1 to UTSA, also one of the lower ranked teams in this in the American. And then, of course, East Carolina with the law, and then losing to Memphis, of course. Like 7 of their 8 losses. That's basically what all that needs to be said. They've lost their form that they had at the time we played them, and they just haven't looked the same. Like, they don't have the same edge offensively. They're defensively vulnerable. Even with the talented shooters they have on the team, it just hasn't had the same impact that they thought they would have had. But still, and not to mention that they're not, they're a different team on the road than they are at home. They're 10-5 at home, 2-6 on the road. Like, you're not going to win a lot of games if you're not consistent from home and away, as FAU is kind of experiencing to a lesser extent at this point. Like, FAU is 3-3 in their last 6, and you look at Tulane, 7 of their last 8 have been losses. But of course, Tulane's offense still something to be very wary, to be very cautious about. Kevin Cross, Jalen Forbes, Colin Holloway, like players who are still capable of just giving up a lot of, scoring a lot of points for this Tulane team, and something that FAU should really be careful about on the defensive side of the ball.
Robbie, the last time we played this Tulane team was kind of in the middle of when the narrative really started to rise of how FAU finds themselves playing down to competition We saw that highlighted with losses earlier in the season with Bryant's, with FGCU. What at the time we thought was a bad loss, but now we see Charlotte's actually a pretty good team in the conference. Narrow victories over this same Tulane team. Wichita State going to UTSA in overtime. So this was a really make or break time for FAU, and I think, or we thought at the time, this win would catapult FAU out of that feeling, out of that mentality of they played down to bad teams, but we still kind of see ourselves still lingering there. So do you feel this is a good opportunity for FAU to break that narrative even more by being able to take down a team after you just lost 2 out of the last 3 games, and a team that last time you played them, it came down to the literal last second?
It's tough because these AAC teams, I really just think they're undervalued. I really think this conference is, outside of a couple teams, is really strong across the board. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the losses to Bryant, FGCU, those are definitely playing down to lesser opponents. But in terms of conference play, I really don't see that being as big of an issue. To critics who do say that, would this game silence them? Yes, but I really do think UNT on the road also would do the same thing, especially because it's a road game. I really do think it's important for FAU to make a statement in this game and maybe try to limit the scoring a little bit of these the Tulane offense. The defensive statistics, at least, they're down a little bit compared to last year, especially when you look at efficiency. And so this is a game where if you're able to stop the Tulane guards and limit their scoring, that's something that makes a statement in this game. You're limiting a really good offensive team, and they were able to do that a little bit. They shut down Colby King. He only had 7 points, 3 and 9 from the field in the last game, but the other guys still, put up 20, 15. So if they can really put out a good defensive performance, I think that's the statement they'll be able to make.
The main guy on this Tulane team is Kevin Cross, and he's somebody that we saw last time out give us 20 points. But Richard, he does everything well for this Tulane team. Leads the team in scoring, leads the team in rebounding, leads the team in assists. You do not get more all-around talent than you find when you can lead your team in those 3 major categories. So how much of a struggle was it for FAU last time playing a player like Kevin Cross, and what do you think the mentality needs to be going against him the second time?
The last time it happened, it was quite tough. Like, we literally needed game-winning free throws from Elijah Martin to pull away with the win over the Green Wave. And with Kevin Cross, he's the center of everything. Like, as you mentioned, he's scoring the ball, rebounding the ball, shooting the ball everywhere from the field. He anywhere he has a spot, any open spot he can find on the court, he will shoot. And that's the mentality FU should have when it comes to Kevin Cross. Like, you have to stay on him at all times. Do not let up, not even for a second. Whether it's Elijah Martin, Janelle Davis, Greenlee, maybe Golden, maybe Lorient, maybe Rosado, who is, getting his form back after coming back from injury. You just got to be at your best defensively against Kevin Cross, because if you're not, he will expose you defensively. And you just got to be at your best on both sides of the ball. Like, play similar to how you did against SMU. Like, you didn't take your opponent for granted. Like, you're playing well on both sides of the ball. Like, you just have a performance where it can't be said that you played bad on one area of the game. Like, have a balanced performance on both sides of the ball. Shoot the ball well. Feed your main guys the ball as much as you can. And on defense, prevent Kevin Cross from getting easy looks. Prevent him from getting a lot of rebounds. Box him out as much as possible. Just make it a difficult night for him. Actually, afternoon, since the game is against Tulane has a noon tip off. You just got to stop them, and then preventing their shooters, Jalen Forbes, Colin Holloway, and Zion James, prevent them from getting the 3 ball very easily, and you might have a pretty good win on your hands on Saturday afternoon.
We see a lot of different mentalities in college basketball and really across basketball in general in terms of how do teams use their bench. There's a team like we see with FAU where, whether it's Nick Boyd coming off the bench, Greenlee, Weatherspoon, whoever it is that's coming off the bench to replace the first set of players, you feel there's a pretty comfortable transition that they can carry the load. Maybe a slight drop off when you see guys like Janelle Davis, Elijah Martin, Vlad Golden go off the floor, but you feel those secondary players are going to come in and do a job. I don't think I've ever seen a team that believes that as little as Tulane does in their squad. You look at the minutes drop off from their main core of players. I mean, Kevin Cross played every single minute in the game against FAU when we played them last time. He played all 40 minutes. You have 35, 33, 37, 28, 28, 26 in their top players. You go from 26 minutes per game to 9.8 points per game. This team does not utilize their bench whatsoever. You look at the starters that when we played them last time, 33 minutes, 40, 39, 38, 37. This is something that is so hard to sustain. And I think that's part of the issue with this Tulane team that they've seen over the end of the season. We've seen it, I guess, comparably over in the NBA with Tom Thibodeau and how he runs his teams, that by the time the end of the season comes around, his players are just so tired and worn down because he plays the same bunch of guys pretty much the entire season, and it does not give a lot of opportunities to their bench squad. And that's what we see here with this Tulane team. So, Robbie, how much of an advantage do you think that is for FAU, that FAU can play pretty much anybody? You don't have anybody that's really mentally and physically worn down at this point in the season, where I think Tulane is just simply running out of gas.
It's a big advantage from that sense, and also from the sense when these guys aren't guaranteed to have on nights every single night. And when you have somebody who can come off the bench like a Weatherspoon or a Boyd who could put up anywhere from 6 to 15 on a good night, when maybe John L. or Elijah isn't having the best night, that is huge alongside the general rest standpoint. And I'm sure Tulane has some guys that could come off the bench and provide scoring when needed. But if they're not playing consistently, then it's going to be less likely that they provide that type of, stick them in the lineup and score type of scoring. So I think it's a huge advantage for FAU, not only from that rest standpoint, but also from the scoring standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case study of just how two teams operate at such a different level when it comes to handling their players. And I think FAU has found the sweet spot, found the recipe, because as the season's gone on, you have seen some of the more role players minutes limited. And whereas with Tulane, they just have not gone to their bench hardly at all this year. And this is something that, I mean, unless you have world-class athletes at the Olympic level, sprinters, like, you just can't ask kids that are 19, 20, 21 years old to be going 2-3 times every week and a half at 35 plus minutes per game. And it's just something that has caught up to them, and that's why they're fourth bottom, in my opinion, at this point in the AAC. Since JJ is not here, we haven't had our traditional Janelle Davis rant, so I will highlight him just a little bit, in Richard, and ask you about him and how his impact, I guess how you've seen over the last couple of games. It feels like he's taken his foot off the gas just a little bit to let other players get involved, and where you saw that 28% of the shots are run through Janelle Davis, which was really high, and JJ was obviously asking for 50%, which is just completely unrealistic. But it does feel like he is starting to take a little bit more of a back seat, as well as he hasn't been quite getting the shots that you normally see him getting. So what do you think that is? What would you chalk that up to?
I would chalk it up to Vlad Golan and Elijah Martin stepping it up as of recent. Vlad Golan's on a pretty good streak. He has a couple of 20-point games to his name. His sixth 20-point game of the season when he got 22 points against Memphis. Like, he was basically cooking Memphis inside, and I just wish he got the ball a little more, just a bit more, because if you're shooting perfect from the field, 9 of 9 shooting from the field, I want you to get the ball way more, so you could have a career performance on the scoring side of things. But yeah, and then Elijah Martin, who's gained a pretty good rhythm. He's on a pretty good streak of scoring in double digits, and he's finally shooting over 40% from the field this season. So that's very significant considering that he was shooting around 35 or 37% from the field for a majority of the season. With this recent stretch of games that he's having, shooting over 40% of the field after the shooting struggles he's had for most of the season, it's very good for him to have. And Janelle Davis, as a result, has taken somewhat of a backseat. And, he had 20 points against Memphis, but he did so on 6 of 15 shooting, 40%. Like, Not exactly going to cut it considering what we know that he's capable of, what he's capable of when it comes to shooting the ball at such an efficient rate, and especially from three. He was also 1 of 5. He just hasn't had the same form he's had like at the beginning of conference play, where he's pretty much consistently averaging 20 again, over 20 a game in conference play. So it's just important that he gets back to his hot spots, where the shots he's making a lot from, whether it's anywhere inside the arc, whether it's the mid-range game, whether it's his creative dribble moves that allows him to create space from his opponent, and just finding the threes that he has a hot stroke from. Like just have his rhythm in those areas, and he will get back to the form that he's had earlier during the early period of conference play, really.
Yeah, as we come to this end of the season, Janelle is a player that FAU is going to have to rely on. Just like we talked about with Kevin Cross of Tulane, he also leads FAU in points, rebounds, and assists. We've seen a little just slight pullback in the offensive end, but maybe it's also just because we've had so high expectations with how he's played this season, how he played in the Arizona game, and how he's played in conference time. He is FAU's undoubted best player. He's really stepped up and emerged, and we've just seen him cut back a little bit from what we expect from him, but you still get one of the best players in the country and arguably the best player in the American Athletic Conference anytime Janelle Davis steps out onto the court. And with that, we will go to our predictions. Robbie, we're going to start with you. FAU, we're 1-0 against Tulane. We've lost 2 out of our last 3 games. How do you think this game is going to go?
Well, I mean, it's tough. I'm going to say FAU is going to win, but I do think Tulane is going to come out with that, trying to break that losing streak type of energy early. I do think the first half is going to be close, 4 points or so at halftime. Either side could lead. It's just going to be a back and forth affair in the first half, but in the second half, I think that it's the trend. I think I think in the second half, FAU is going to come out and put Tulane away and really make a statement, because it's a statement game for them. I think they win by 10. I think they win 86-76. And yeah,
Richard, how are we going to go?
Yeah, considering Tulane's defensive inconsistencies, their struggles in that area, which have resulted in them losing 7 of their last 8, and the offense not being what it was as it was compared to earlier this season when they last faced us, I would say FAU wins this by a convincing margin, as long as they get their main guys going, as long as some key role players off the bench just to score plenty of points as they can with the chances they have with the ball. And with that, I would go FAU 82, Tulane 70.
Okay. For Tulane, this is a game that their season's going to be over immediately if they lose. But if they win, you can see that being something that energizes their sails and gets them pushing forward and ready for the conference tournament time. You've lost 4 games in a row. You've lost 7 out of your last 8. But then you pencil this FAU game in, having to go to FAU, and then next week having to go to now ranked USF. So 2 very rough home games in a row. Really the hardest 2-game stretch on their schedule so far this season. If you come out of that with 2-0, Tulane is a team that'd be very scary to play come conference time, because there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of points to be scored. They're actually 20th in the country in points per game, whereas FAU is 21st in the country in points per game. So we know they can score. We know at their best, they're heavy hitting and they can come out and they can fly. Talent all across that starting lineup, and that's pretty much the only players you see the entire game. So it's going to be a game that they take very seriously, as again, this is going to either help them when it comes to conference time, or break them and pretty much crush their souls, and they'll just accept defeat for the remainder of the season. They played us very tightly, a game that really came down to the wire. Some argued it was a bad call on the 3-point shot, even though I believe there's clear contact on Elijah Martin on that shot. So I think they're going to come out with a little bit of chip on their shoulder, come out, play really strong in the first half, but I think I can see FAU coming back in the second half like they usually do. I'm going to go with FAU 83, Tulane 76, a game that's hard fought, and both teams will feel each other by the end of the game, but ultimately FAU comes out victorious. Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments about this game. Give us your score predictions, as well as your thoughts on the baseball team, your thoughts on the 2 previous games we've seen FAU play. Let us know all those thoughts down below in the comments. If you want some more FAU content, go over to FAUowlsnest.com, where you see some written work by these gentlemen above me here. Great work over there out on the website. We appreciate y'all very much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Go Owls.
Thank you, everyone. Go Owls.